In Thailand, as pro-democracy protesters in the country mark the Human Rights Day and also the Thai Constitution Day with rallies and boycott calls for abolition of the country's strict royal defamation laws. A group of demonstrators rallied outside the United Nations building amid police presence. The protests came as the police charged 3 protesters with the draconian lèse majesté or royal defamation law. Security was beefed up to stop the protesters from marching towards the royal palace. For months, the protesters have been demanding curbs on King Maha Vajiralongkorn's power. They accuse the monarch of siding with Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha, who came to power in 2014 coup. Criticism of the monarchy is a crime in Thailand and is punishable by 15 years in jail.
Today, on Constitution Day and Human Rights Day, we, the student and pro-democracy people, whose freedom is suppressed by Article 112 of Thai Criminal Code, we join together to demand the abolishment of this legal provision and to end any legal action concerning this law.
For everything that's happening in Thailand, let's quickly get in a sense of perspective, and for that I'm joined in by our guest Frederick Spohr, who's the project director for Thailand and Myanmar Frederick Noman Foundation for Freedom. Thank you so much, Frederick, for joining our broadcast. Now, do you not find it bitterly ironical that the International Human Rights Day coincides with Thailand's Constitution Day, that too at a time when the political conflict between protesters and the government is being called a human rights crisis itself?
Well, I mean, the lèse majesté is definitely a concern for many human rights defenders here. What's surprisingly is that the law hasn't been used in the last years, and now the protesters having gained momentum and targeting the monarchy more and more, and now the law has been used again, and this is definitely a cause for concern for many human rights defenders in Thailand, but globally, I would say.
Right. Frederick, the CPD, a Human Rights and Democracy non-governmental organization, has called for the formation of a People's Human Rights Committee to look into human rights violations in Thailand. How helpful will this be in fixing the crisis?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of commissions and committees in Thailand. There are enough observers, I would say, of human rights in Thailand. The thing is that they also need to be enforced. I think it's known what are the problems in Thailand concerning human rights. It's not only about the big politics, it's also what happens in the fishing industry, for example. Thailand is a hotspot for human trafficking. I think the problems are clear, but
right.
In the future, we will need to see some solutions for that.
Right. It's interesting that you highlighted how enforcement needs to be done. On that note, Frederick, do you not agree that the National Human Rights Commission has failed to properly inspect human rights violations in Thailand?
There might be some constraints, yes, of course, but again, I would say the problems are clear, but the enforcement need to change, and there are definitely human rights issues in Thailand, and they need to be addressed, and they should be addressed by the government. Yeah.
And since it is also Thailand's Constitution Day, how problematic is Thailand's constitution at the moment, and where lies the solution?
Looking at the Thai constitution, you can see that it's not a clear democratic constitution. There are several issues with it. I would say the biggest issue is the huge power of the Senate. That's also one of the big targets of the protesters. The Senate is not elected, but it's selected by the military, and it's very powerful when it comes to electing the prime minister, when it comes to constitutional changes. So I think you wouldn't see that in a classical democratic constitution, such a powerful Senate that is not elected by the people. This is an issue. The protesters demand changes, and we'll need to see if the establishment is ready for those changes. I might have some doubts on that if you saw the recent reactions on demands to change the constitution, especially changing the powerful Senate. But there are discussions in Thailand, also in the parliament. I'm a bit in doubt, or let's say the establishment has sent signals that it's not willing to change the constitution as much as many protesters wanted to change.
Right, Frederick, thank you so much for bringing in your inputs to our broadcast today.